Alright, all you people over here, and all you wild people over here, today I'm going to take a look back at Kiss's infamous 1974 appearance on the Mike Douglas Show. We're going to go behind the scenes and look at it from the perspective of gutless Paul Stanley. So stick around, Cat Stanley Space Demons coming at ya! Okay, so before I get to the Mike Douglas Show appearance, we're going to give you a little backstory here, a little Kiss-tory lesson, if you will. Now, Kiss released their first album for Neil Bogart's brand new Casablanca record label in February of 1974. Now, before he started Casablanca Records, Neil Bogart had spent the previous decade at the Buddha label, which was previously called Kama Sutra Records. Now, Buddha specialized in bubblegum pop and creating hit singles. They had groups like the Ohio Express, 1910 Fruit Gum Company, and the Lemon Pipers. Bogart was all about hit singles, but he didn't really hear any hit singles on that first Kiss album. So when sales of that record started to lag, he came up with an idea. He wanted the band to record a version of an old Bobby Rydell song called Kissin' Time, and to stage a series of kissing contests across the country. The idea was to have a local radio station sponsor a kissing marathon with a bunch of young couples competing to see who could kiss the longest. The grand prize winners would get an all-expense-paid trip to Hawaii and an appearance on the Mike Douglas Show. Now, who better to promote a kissing contest than a band named Kiss? And what a better way to promote a new single called Kissin' Time. Now, the band wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea of recording the old 1959 Bobby Rydell tune, but they did so at the urging of their manager Bill Aucoin, who thought they should go along with it. They even rewrote some of the lyrics to give the song more of a hard rock edge. And the song would be added to the later pressings of that first Kiss album. Early pressings of that record that don't have Kissing Time on it are actually highly collectible and sought after by Kiss fans and record collectors. Okay, so this brings us to the Mike Douglas Show appearance, April 29th, 1974. The band actually performed the song Firehouse live on the show, and if you watch the footage of the performance, they are playing live. This is not a mime job or a lip sync job. They are playing live. So after the performance, Jean Simmons comes out to represent the band on the panel discussion. The winners of the kissing contest come out. Comedian Toady Fields is out there along with Mike Douglas and Jean Simmons, along with comedian Robert Klein, which led to a funny exchange between Gene and Toady Fields.
Yes. Would it be funny if under this he was just a nice Jewish boy?
You should only know.
I do, you can't hide the hook.
Now, Gene actually seems to be game here. He seems to have a funny sense of humor. But Gene said this, and this is something Paul Stanley took issue with.
You know, your audience really looks appetizing.
Oh, really? Are you a bat?
Yes. Actually, what I am is evil incarnate. And some of those cheeks and necks look really good.
He felt Gene really came off pretty goofy, is how he described him, because he referred to himself as evil incarnate and stuck out his tongue, which would end up becoming a signature move, but Paul took umbrage with it. Okay, so that was the Mike Douglas Show appearance. The song Kissin' Time didn't really end up doing much for him. The band was still pretty unknown at this time. But now I'd like to go backstage to what happened before the show. Now, Paul Stanley said that this appearance was the catalyst for Jean Simmons becoming perceived as the band's default spokesperson. The guy the publications wanted to interview, the one on the magazine covers. You know, this led to countless more episodes of him using I rather than we. He wrote in his memoir, he said, Gene implied that he was the band's frontman, lead singer, and mastermind all rolled into one. And more than 40 years later, Paul still harbored resentment for it. But here's what you don't know. Before Gene's appearance on the show, Kiss manager Bill Aucoin approached the entire band to find out which member would be willing to go out and join the panel discussion. Paul told him in no uncertain terms, "Not me, I'm staying backstage." That's right, Paul Stanley flatly refused to go out. It appears that Paul was intimidated by the Mike Douglas audience. He described them in his memoir as looking like moms and pops out of a Norman Rockwell painting. He felt the band would be treated as nothing more than a novelty and milked for laughs. He felt that all the people over here in the Mike Douglas show audience, he couldn't win that audience over. He had to win audiences over before, but that's one audience he couldn't win over. And he had no desire to be ridiculed. So Paul Stanley was given the opportunity to go out there on the Mike Douglas show, and he flatly refused. Mr. Rock and Roll Evangelist, Mr. All You People Over Here, the actual frontman of the band, was given the opportunity to nut up and go out and represent the group in whatever manner he saw becoming of a member of Kiss. On that day, he could have shaped the narrative surrounding the band the way he wanted. He could have shaped his own public perception, but he flat out refused. He didn't have the guts to step up and take the bull by the balls and talk to Mike Douglas and Toady Fields. So it was Jean Simmons who stepped up. He became the man Paul Stanley couldn't and went out there and accepted the challenge. The same way he did when Bill Aucoin approached the band for a volunteer to learn how to breathe fire as a part of the group's stage show. Nobody else had the guts, so Gene stepped up and accepted the responsibility for the good of the band. Paul Stanley certainly didn't. Now, in the end, fire breathing was probably more appropriate for Gene's demon character anyway, but that's beside the point. The point is, Paul Stanley pussed out. And yet, more than 40 years on, he's still complaining about Gene's performance on that Mike Douglas show. He still hasn't gotten over the fact that Gene had the balls and he didn't. It kind of reminds me of the incel guy, you know, the guy that doesn't have the guts to talk to women. And he's jealous of the guy that's got the balls to approach women. And maybe this guy he thinks isn't as good looking as he is. And maybe this guy doesn't have as good of a personality. But this guy's got balls and he talks to women and he gets phone numbers and he gets dates and he gets relationships. And this incel guy's sitting back resenting this guy because he's got balls and he doesn't. That's kind of what Paul Stanley looks like in this situation to me. He could have taken some accountability, taken a look in the mirror and said, you know, I regret not going out and talking on the Mike Douglas show that day. I really feel like I could have represented the band better than Gene did. But because of my own insecurities, I wasn't comfortable in that situation. Something like that. But instead, he slams Jean Simmons for having the balls to go out there. It's like the butterfly effect. Think of how different the course of history might have been if Paul had stepped up that day. Maybe he could have been perceived as the band's spokesperson. The magazine cover boy on Cream, Circus, you know, the pinup in all the teen magazines like Tiger Beat and 17. Is that the reason why you resent Gene so much, Paul? Because he has balls? You never got your centerfold next to David Cassidy and Jimmy J.J. Walker.
Kid Dynamite!
In those teeny bopper magazines. You'd have to wait until the band took the makeup off for that. But then you were already in your 30s. Not really a good look for the teeny boppers, eh, Paul? So there you have it. Almost a half century later, and Paul Stanley still hasn't gotten over the fact that Jean Simmons had the balls to go out there and talk to Mike Douglas. Thanks for checking in with me today. I hope you dug the show. We'll see you next time. Who's here?